Okay guys, so in this video, we're going to look at how much money do you need to start an Amazon FBA business in 2020. So I've got three parts to this video. Initially, we're going to look at startup costs and some of the optional costs associated with Amazon FBA. I'm then going to do a product comparison and show you three different potential costs for three different potential products to give you an idea of how much money you may need depending on whether you're launching a low cost product or a high cost product. And then finally, have a big announcement, so make sure you stick about until the end of the video for that. So let's kick things off by looking at the startup and optional costs for Amazon FBA. So what I'm doing in this section, I've got a high budget and a low budget option because I know we've all got different situations that we're in. So hopefully this will give you an idea whether Amazon FBA can be viable for you or not. So the first thing that you're going to need to do, and I would strongly recommend if you're starting an Amazon FBA business, and that is to set up a limited company. Now, when I set up my business, it cost around £20. I paid a formations company, and with that, they did all of the paperwork for me and sent me through some printed documents as well. If you're on a strict budget, you can just go direct to HMRC, and that will cost you £12 and a bit of your time to submit those forms. The next thing you're going to need is a business bank account. Don't bother trying to put any of this through a personal account, so set up your own business bank account. Now, most businesses in the UK will offer promotional periods, and it probably won't cost you much in the first year or potentially the second year as well. If they do charge you, it may only be about £10 or so per month. You're also going to need an Amazon professional seller account. Don't bother with Amazon's basic account because that only allows you to sell up to 35 items per month. And if you're starting Amazon FBA, the chances are you're looking to sell hundreds of units per month. So go with an Amazon professional account and that will cost you £30 per month. You then got the logo, so all businesses need a logo. Now I use Fiverr for all of my design needs like that if I'm not doing it myself. Now you can get a logo done for as cheap as kind of £15, £20. So I've put £25 as a low budget option, and that should get you between 1 to 3 different designs to choose from. If you've got a bit more money, then spend around £50 or so, and that should get you 3 to 5 different designs to choose from. The next thing you're going to need is barcodes. Now, barcodes can vary a great deal in price. Some people like to buy them from sites such as Barcode Mania where they cost a few dollars each. With my products, I always buy the official GS1 barcodes. Now, part of this is because I didn't know that there was a thing called GTIN exemption existed when I started my business. So I pay GS1 £145 per year for official GS1 barcodes, which I've had absolutely zero issues with. However, if you're on a tight budget, consider the GTIN exemption. Basically, you ask Amazon for approval to not use a barcode, and if they grant that, it won't cost you a penny, and you won't need a barcode for your product. The next thing to consider is whether you need a domain name. Now, if you plan on doing lots of off-site marketing, non-Amazon marketing, and you're going to be driving people to other places, then you're going to want your own domain name. If you're just going to purely rely on Amazon, which I do, and the domain names you don't necessarily need. I still have my domain names and they're pointed directly to my Amazon storefront. So it's not a very expensive item. So depending on what your budget is, you could probably afford it either way. Whereas business insurance is actually quite expensive. When I first started my Amazon FBA business, I didn't have business insurance for the first few months. And then once the things started taking off and the product was selling well, I forked out for business insurance, and that cost me around £400 per year, which is quite a lot of money. However, it does give you that peace of mind. If someone manages to hurt themselves with any of the products you sell, you do have insurance and you are protected. Another expense which is optional to start with, and that is an accountant. Now, if you've started a limited company, then in 12 months time, you're definitely going to need an accountant either way. However, in the first few months, if you're trying to keep your budget as tight as possible, maybe you don't want to cough up for an accountant just yet. Just keep all the records of all purchases and all transactions that take place during that period. And then when you do sign up with an accountant, you can then digitize those records and the accountant will be able to do all of the accounts for you. So my accountant charges approximately £100 per month. However, some accountants do charge a little bit more or a little bit less. That just gives you a rough idea of what to budget for a proper accountant to take care of your Amazon FBA business. You then have the option of a trademark. Now, I trademarked my business a few months into the selling process. If I was starting again, I would probably do the trademark from the very beginning to provide the maximum protection possible. In the UK, it cost me £170 for the application process. However, as with many things in this video, it is optional. And if you really are on a tight budget, then the trademark can wait until you've proven that the business is viable. You then have software to consider. Now, you only need one piece of software to start an Amazon FBA business, and that is a sales estimator. Now, I would recommend X-Ray from Helium 10. It's available separately from the overall suite, so you can get that as cheap as £14 per month, which is super cheap for for a sales estimator. There are other solutions and they generally all work pretty much exactly the same. X-ray is just my preference for now. Alternatively, if you want to just fork out from the very start, just go for the full Helium 10 tool suite because it's got all of the tools you will need for the rest of your Amazon FBA journey. What I'll do is I'll pop up some codes on this screen to give you a discount if you did want to sign up for Helium 10 at this point. So that gives you an idea of the total kind of startup stroke optional cost for starting an FBA business. And as you can see, they vary quite massively from £81 on the super low budget option all the way up to in excess of £1,000. So depending on what your budget is, you can select options from either side to find the right balance to suit your budget. So now that's with the startup and optional cost out the way, let's do a product cost comparison. So we're going to look at 3 different products. We've got low cost, medium cost and high cost products. And this will give you an idea of potentially how much you can spend or how little you can spend to start an Amazon FBA business. So one of your first product costs when you start an Amazon FBA business, and that is the samples. Now you can see here I've got costs ranging all the way from £100 up to £500 for samples. So why is there such a wide range? Well, it depends how involved you want to get in the sample process. So for example, if you've got £500 to spend on samples, you might get 3 or 4 samples from different suppliers. You might want all of those samples customized to the changes that you want to make. You might do a couple of rounds of samples, and you might also buy lots of the current bestsellers on Amazon so you can study and analyze the competition. So that is how you could easily spend £500 on samples. A medium cost might involve buying samples from 2 or 3 suppliers, getting the kind of off-the-shelf samples, getting the samples in, testing the quality, then going back to maybe 1 or 2 of the suppliers saying, look, I want a final sample in this specification. And that's why you would end up with kind of a medium cost of maybe £250 or £300 for samples. Then the super low cost option is maybe £100 if you've got a very small and very light products that you can get samples for maybe £20, £30, £40. That is where you might keep costs as low as £100. Moving on to photography, and this is one of those costs again that can vary quite a bit. Now I've had products where a location shoot was required and that cost towards £500. I've also had products where I just sent the products to my photographer and they took 8 or 9 shots in their studio and that run about £200, £250. And then there's also, I've had a product where I do some of the photography myself. Obviously with the YouTube channel, I now have quite a bit of photography equipment, so it makes sense to me to actually experiment with that a bit and save a little bit of money. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking your own photos unless you feel very confident about what you're doing. You don't necessarily need the best camera in the world, but you certainly do need some good lighting to make sure you get the best possible photos. So keep that all in mind when you're budgeting for your photos. That is one of the things that will make or break your product. So if you need to spend in one area, make sure you spend it on the photography. The next few items are kind of very similar in the fact that you can choose to spend pretty much as much as you'd like. You've got the packaging design, your product insert and the 3D render. So your packaging and your product inserts, you can get them done very cheaply on Fiverr. And the 3D render, if you've got some very nice packaging, or maybe there's a feature that you can't show of your product in the photography, then potentially you can show it in a 3D render instead. So consider that a 3D render may be the right option for some products, but not for all products. It certainly can be a very good complementary image to a wide range of really good photos. We then move on to the biggest cost, and that is the initial inventory that you're going to be buying for your product. So I've got 3 examples here. So look, we've got one where we're buying 500 units at £6, which would cost approximately £3,000. We've then got 400 units at £4.50, that would cost you £1,800. And then we've got 300 units at £3.33, and that would cost you approximately £1,000. So that gives you an idea, depending on what your unit cost is and how many units you buy, how much you might be spending on that initial batch of stock. On top of that, you then have the Alibaba trade assurance fee. Now this applies if you're paying by credit card and is currently 2.9%. So on a £3,000 order, that would be an £87 fee on the credit card. Now, if you have a supplier you trust, now I wouldn't trust any supplier with your very first order. I would always pay by credit card or PayPal or something that offers additional protection. However, with many of my suppliers who are on 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th orders, I pay by backs, so there's absolutely no trade assurance fee, but you're still trade assurance protected, provided you use the bank account details that Alibaba show you on the trade assurance screen. So it is possible to save 2.9% once you start paying your supplier by backs instead of credit card. Another cost to consider is shipping and insurance. Now this can cost anything from a few £100 into the thousands of pounds depending on the size, weight, the volume of the shipment. However, it is also possible sometimes, depending on the supplier and depending on the cost of the product, to negotiate the shipping cost into the unit cost itself. So that's why on the low cost option, I've got a 0 shipping cost. So just to show it is possible, I'm not saying it's always possible, but sometimes it is possible to negotiate a nice deal with the supplier that they'll include shipping as part of the unit cost. You then have customs duty and VAT. So if you're using a freight forwarder, then you'll be paying customs duty and VAT when the product arrives in UK ports. So to give you an example, to work out the £910 you've got there, you take the first order cost of £3,000, you add the shipping and insurance cost of £500, you need to add 5% customs duty, which applies to that total amount, then you apply VAT to that total amount as well, which gives you a customs duty and VAT total of £910. I do have another video on customs duty and VAT. If you just search on YouTube for Darren Lynch and importing from China, that should cover that in a bit more detail. However, as mentioned, if you did manage to negotiate the price of shipping into the product cost and the supplier is providing DDP shipping, so they're paying the customs duty and VAT on your behalf, then there'll be a zero cost to pay at that point. You then have product inspection, which is what you get done just before your products leave China and make their way to the UK. Now what this is, someone will go in, they'll inspect the products and make sure that they have been created to the spec that you gave the supplier. Now the cost of this inspection depends on how much time and how much detail you want that inspector to go into. So you can spend anything from £150 or more down to zero if you decide an inspection is not for you. Now, I don't generally bother with inspections because I try to build a good relationship with the supplier during the sampling process, and also when I pay for that first order, I generally use a credit card and trade assurance to make sure I've got maximum protection. But I completely understand why people might want to use product inspection, but if you're on a super tight budget, it is one of those things that you can potentially pass up on. The final cost, and this is one of the biggest unknowns of Amazon, is probably the biggest difference as well between a video I made very similar to this about a year ago to what I'm making today, and that is PPC cost. Now, I have seen PPC costs skyrocket over the past 12 months. I mean, more than double. So I'm seeing costs per clicks that have gone from kind of 50p up to £1 or £2. Now, I have someone I mentor who recently launched a product, and the main keyword in that niche had a suggested bid from Amazon of over £7. I was actually shocked when I saw that figure, but it does show that PPC costs are going up, and they're going to continue to increase. So what I've put here are very approximate costs. These are very, very loose costs, and you should not use these as an exact indication of what to budget for. Ultimately, with PPC, you need to spend whatever you need to spend to get your product launched and ranked well organically. The success of your PPC also very much depends on how good your product is and how well it competes with other more established products. You know, if you've got a really, really good product with a really strong selling point that looks different to other products and you have no reviews, you'll perform better with PPC than a product that looks the same as all of the other products and has no reviews. So consider that your PPC success and your PPC cost is very much dependent on how good your product is and how well it stands out in a crowded niche. So overall, that gives us some pretty big costs. I mean, you've got the high cost product running at over £7,000, the medium cost product close to £4,500, and the low cost product at only £1,600. Now, if you combine that with the low startup cost, which I think was £81, potentially you could launch a product on Amazon FBA for less than £1,700. So hopefully these two slides give you a good idea of what a product costs and what costs are involved in starting an Amazon FBA business. So moving on to the big announcement that I promised at the start of this video, and I'd like to introduce you to my brand new YouTube channel, Honest Money. Now, this is something I've been thinking about for a while, and I've had lots of questions from you guys relating to personal and business finance. And it's something that I haven't been able to make videos about in the constraints of an Amazon themed FBA channel. So I decided to start a new YouTube channel dedicated to business and personal financial advice, which hopefully you guys will find super, super useful. I'm planning to release the first video on Monday, so make sure you guys head over to honestmoney.co.uk. That URL will redirect directly to the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button and then the notification bell, and then you'll get an alert as soon as the first video is released on Monday.